Tom House was Hank Aaron's teammate from 1971 to 1974 with the Braves, but Tom also played a unique role on one of the most historic nights in baseball history. So, Tom, thanks for making the time. Obviously, I wish we could take this stroll down memory lane under much different circumstances.
Me too. But, any positive memory is a plus. So it's actually been a busy 2 days, but kind of a fun remembering and laughing and smiling and all the things that go with a great memory like this.
And I think that's a beautiful thing as well. And there are so many great memories of Hank Aaron that so many people share because he meant so much to so many people. But let me start by asking you what you remember from meeting Hank Aaron and your time spent with him across those 4 seasons together.
Well, Grant, I'm sure you get what baseball is all about. There's superstars, there's, stars, there's regular everyday players, and then there's fringe players. And I was one of those fringe players that was lucky enough to hang around in the big leagues because I was a left-hander that threw curveballs for a strike.
There you go.
So my tenure with the Braves was just that. I was always the ninth, 10th man on a 10-man pitching staff. And as a low-end guy in the clubhouse, hanging out with stars and superstars, Henry was one of the guys. He didn't treat guys like myself any different than he did the Ron Reeds or the Phil Necros. Genuine. He'd play hearts and spades. I've mentioned this over the last couple of days. If you didn't know it was Henry Aaron, you'd just think he was one of the guys, if that makes any sense.
No, it's incredible. And let me ask you a quick question as well, because I know for a lot of people, there's always been that question. Is he Hank Aaron or is he Henry Aaron? You knew him as a teammate. Which one of those did he prefer, or was that more of one of those things that kind of came along with getting to know the man himself?
I called him Hank from day one, but he was also Hammer to us.
Of course.
And I think when I ran in and gave him the ball, it's a little fuzzy because it was so much excitement, but I think I said, "Here it is, Hammer." So, it's like when you have kids, you have nicknames for your kids, then you have names you call them when they're in trouble or formal. It's a mix and match.
Well, there you go. Well, not to bury the lead, you just mentioned it, but really special to have Tom on the show as we celebrate the life and the legacy of Hank Aaron. And, of course, that iconic night on April 8th of 1974. As some of you listening may know, Tom House was the man who caught the baseball hit by Hank Aaron for that record-breaking 715th home run. And it happened back 47 years ago at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium as Hank connected for a 2-run blast against Al Downing of the Dodgers, one of the most iconic moments in all of sports. So, Tom, I'd love to hear that story from taking your place out in the bullpen to the celebration that followed when 715 left the park.
It's actually scripted like a movie. You couldn't have plotted it out and had it end any better. But what it boiled down to, it actually started in 73 when it became apparent that Henry was going to eventually break Babe Ruth's record. And leading into the new year in 74, during spring training, the hoopla and the media and whatever, you started getting a different feel in the clubhouse and, before and after games. And then going into Cincinnati, if he hits the tiebreaker, is he going to play Saturday and Sunday? And then, we had heard things about off-the-field death threats, and we knew that the Braves had hired a bodyguard, Calvin, a great guy, by the way, Calvin, and we were also seeing that Henry was being treated a little bit different about buses from hotels to airports and airports to hotels and being in rooms under a different name. So we kind of knew things were going on, but not to the depths that Henry was being exposed to the whole thing. But Henry, Hank, Hammer would show up every day being himself. Again, if you didn't know who he was, you'd never know what was going on off the field. All you saw that when he came to the ballpark, he did what Henry Aaron did best. So that's the best I can say. The only other story I might add in is he tied the record on Friday, played Saturday and Sunday. So when we came back into Atlanta, my biggest take initially was the amount of people in the stands. Because, there's rabid baseball fans in the Atlanta area. And at that time, the rabid baseball fans that came every night were 10 to 15,000 people.
Right.
Well, now all of a sudden there's 55,000.
Mm-hmm.
So the intensity was dialed up. The feel of the crowd, in other words, it was like peaking at the right time at the right place for a historic event.
Yeah, and history it was indeed. April 8th, 1974. That's the night that Hank Aaron broke that record. And Tom, I think you brought up something pretty interesting about the timeline of this, because it's 73, it became pretty apparent because he hit 40 home runs to give him 713. And then he got to kind of sit there all winter and think about it. One home run away from Babe Ruth. Wasted no time tying that record and got to break the record, of course, at home. And as we've laid out, as we've seen the highlight, I mean, I have to stop and watch it every single time that it's on, whether that's in the ballpark, I see it on a screen, whether it's MLB Network or some other classic place. The calls are iconic on the radio by both Milo Hamilton and by Vin Scully. It's an iconic moment for all of sports, and one that for you personally, it touches you in a different way, literally, than it touches the rest of us. What do you remember most about the night itself and that moment that you shared with Hank, handing him that baseball and that piece of history?
Well, Grant, I'd like to say that it was fully remembered and fully thought out and fully explained. It wasn't. I know, all the stories out there. All us bullpen guys had our own little territories that we respected. If the ball was hit in our little area that we could catch the ball in, the other relievers wouldn't bounce on the other people's territory. So everybody talks about a great catch, or, it was, if I would have stood still, it would have hit me right in the forehead. I remember catching the ball, and then this big fish net shot right behind me. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw Bill Buckner. He tried to climb the fence to catch it. And then I don't remember anything else after that. So all of a sudden, I'm putting the ball in Henry's face at home plate. When I got there, I kind of, wheeled through the crowd because it was pretty crowded.
Yeah.
And I got to him just as he was hugging his mother and she was hugging him. And there were tears in his eyes and tears in her eyes. And I do remember thinking, this is like a lifesaver commercial.
Right.
And then I also know, after 50 years in the game, that I've never seen an athlete turn around on TV and say, "Hi, Dad." They always say, "Hi, Mom." So I knew intuitively that this was a special moment. But more than just a special moment for baseball, it was a special moment in his life, the release of whatever emotions he was, holding inside of himself. Here he is in a point in time with his mom, and a feat that at that time had never been done before. And from my perspective, being a small part of a huge moment like that, it kind of defined, my career, and I think actually helped me focus on a purpose bigger than just statistics when it came to baseball. If that makes sense. Is that too much?
No, it makes perfect sense. And baseball is just such this amazing connective tissue, I think, for society. I mean, if you're a fan of baseball, I think you're automatically, just by default, you're a fan of the history and the relevance of the things that are accomplished on that field. And I don't think there's any other sport that taps into and reaches down and connects so many people through the nostalgia of the things that have been accomplished. So to me, what you're saying, it makes perfect sense, because it not only did it connect you with that event, his teammates with that event, of course, finally accomplishing that thing that whether he set out to do it or not, he was knocking on the door of history to finally get there. And I'm sure the relief that Hank Aaron had to feel to know that this long pursuit, I've done it, it's finished, it's in the record book, so to speak, quite literally in the record book.
And, you chose those words perfectly. What I felt the crowd. There's a difference between hearing a crowd and feeling a crowd. And then for a brief moment, whatever the feelings and the electricity of the moment with his mom and himself, I got a brief glimpse of what it was all about. And I still, what you said about when you see it on TV or whatever, I'll stop no matter what I'm doing. And I get the same warm fuzzy every time.
Yeah, it is a beautiful moment, and for so many reasons and on so many levels. And, Tom, as we talk about the emotion behind that night, behind that home run, and I know we also spend an equal amount, maybe too much time, looking at numbers when it comes to baseball. And Hank Aaron has incredible numbers, but you got to see it up close and personal. The toll that home run chase was taking on him, the threats, the ugliness, and some of the things that people subjected him to, all because of his success on a baseball field. But I really look to, as we celebrate the life and the legacy and the accomplishments of Hank Aaron, his perseverance, his courage, the grace, and that humility that stand as big as any of his records in my eyes. What do you remember about all of that in light of his pursuit of baseball history and Ruth's record?
Well, it's what I'm perceiving in superstars and elite athletes that I've continued to be able to be around and working with. There's this quiet competence. There's this dedication to excellence that when they show up at the ballpark, what people see when they're playing the game is only just a minimum part of what goes into their actual performance.
Right.
And watching Henry, and you have your top 5, top 10, his commitment to excellence. He showed up every day and did in his process everything he needed to do to be the best Henry that Henry could be. And that's the one consistent thing I see across the board. He didn't do it with fanfare. It was very non-controversial. And we all know the dark parts of our society with racism and hiddenness and biases and all that. With Henry, he was authentic. He treated everybody the same. He gave it his all. He was quiet and he was confident. And when you put all those pieces together, of all the superstars I've seen, been around, and worked with, Henry was the most quietly competent on and off the field of all of them.
That's inspirational. Gives us something to aspire to, and Hank Aaron gave us no shortage of that. I wanted to ask you as well, Tom House, what does Hank Aaron mean to you, and what do you think his lasting legacy will be?
Well, what he meant to me was I got as a low-end major league athlete just trying to survive. For a brief moment in time, I got to get in the superstar arena and experience not just the numbers and the celebration, but the joy of sport, the joy of baseball, the power of play. And I think it's one of the reasons I stayed in after I was done playing and became a coach, because Henry really didn't realize it, but he mentored me as much as he did a Dusty Baker or a Ralph Garr.
Yeah.
And I will forever be, appreciative of that. And every day that I go to the ballpark, I try to do, in my way, contribute the same way that Henry did in his way. So that's the legacy that I feel from Henry.